All right, what's up, everybody? Welcome back to the Launchpad Podcast. None other. Today, I had on my buddy Tyler from the YouTube channel Tyler Saucier. Tyler Saucier. I forget which one it is. I'm kind of an asshole, and I need to clarify that with him. But his YouTube channel is, Find the Others, and he also creates psychedelic content. I highly recommend you go check out his videos. He creates great stuff, really high quality, and he's a really sweet guy, and he has a lot of cool things to say. So yeah, I really enjoyed my conversation with Tyler. I hope that you enjoyed this episode, and I hope that you have a beautiful day. Peace out, everybody.
Merging with simulator in 3, 2, 1.
But yeah, man, tell me more about this Blue Lotus tea you got there. So what is it about that you were briefly describing some of the subjective effects that you like about Blue Lotus tea, but what is the actual alkaloid in it that's responsible for some of those desirable effects?
I don't remember the name of it. It's something like tannin, or I could be totally wrong. I think it's one or two main alkaloids. But what I like about it is it's very, very subtle. Because I mean, for someone who might want to compare it to like cannabis or something, it's way, way more subtle than that. And that's actually why I'll have Blue Lotus by itself, because if you're smoking with it, to me it will overpower the Blue Lotus, maybe unless you know what to look for. So what I like about it is it's just peaceful, this very zen, tranquil feeling. Depends how much you have too, if you're trying to heroic dose Blue Lotus, which I kind of did the first time that I tried it. I really wanted to feel something, so I made it out of 20 grams of Blue Lotus tea, which is
Please describe what happened to you.
Well, if I drink enough of this, I can get there again. It was still subtle, man, but it just felt like a trance like state of peace and focus, and it really anchors you in the present moment. And anything that can do that to me is a good thing. And I had recently tried MDMA maybe a little bit before I tried Blue Lotus, and I would describe it as a very, very, very light version of that, where it's just you feel good, and there's this kind of elimination of fear. Maybe that's what it is. It's getting your amygdala to kind of shut up a little bit. So yeah, it's kind of hard to describe besides just subjective feelings of peace and tranquility. And I was telling you a second ago that it puts me in a poetic mood.
Yeah.
And in the way that I actually discovered that was through playing music. I drank some Blue Lotus tea, and I was playing music with my buddy, and I was playing bass, and we were making this little song, and I just improvised this bass line. I was about to add some bass guitar to the song we were working on, and we did a practice run through, and I had been drinking the Blue Lotus tea, and I just poured this poetry straight out of my soul, and it was the most divine inspiration that I've felt in music. And luckily my friend recorded it, so I have the proof, I have the receipts.
Yeah.
And so yeah, I'll drink it before a podcast, because it just seems to center me, ground me, and then it brings this kind of creative side out of me in a very subtle way.
Nice, dude. Yeah, I like compounds that have that balance there between focus and calm. You know what I mean? What you're describing about that sort of zen state that it puts you in reminds me a lot of my relationship to something like Kratom. You ever tried Kratom?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, dude.
I regularly use Kratom.
Yeah, man. It's I don't use it every day. I would say I use it maybe somewhere around once a week on average, But when I do use it, it's very intentional. It's I'm going to get some extra work done in the afternoon. I'm going to go like on a run or something. And I like a small dose of Kratom because that small dose gives me that perfect balance that I was talking about of like this slight energy increase that's also matched with this sort of like anxiolytic effect that's just kind of like puts me into this flow state, you know? And so it's like whatever particular activity that I'm engaging with, it's like I'm more into that activity. And yeah, it's really beautiful, dude. But the Blue Lotus is really interesting to me because that's one that I've researched a little bit myself, and you know, it has some like historical use with like the Egyptians and stuff. And I was just looking it up while you were telling your story there, because I thought that the alkaloid in it was a slight like opiate agonist or something like that. And I just looked it up, and it says that the two main alkaloids are apomorphine and nuciferine. And I'm pretty sure apomorphine is a, opiate. Let me look this up.
Yeah, checks out.
Yeah, but no, I mean, but that's the thing, like, you know, if you, like Kratom, also like I think it's mitragynine, something like that, is the alkaloid that has that sort of opiate affinity. And you know, like people can develop problems to Kratom like a big time, you know. And there's whole like Reddit forums on like quitting Kratom, and that's something people need to be like honest with themselves about whenever they're interacting with something like that. Is that sort of potential? But like Kratom's one for me, man, where like I've used it for a long time now and have benefited from it in the ways that I described a minute ago, but I've never had an issue with like constantly redosing or feeling the need to take it several days in a row. I just don't lean towards that sort of like addictive pattern with Kratom, but I honestly struggle more with the weed thing than anything else when it comes to addiction and like those habits, you know?
Yeah, well, it's funny that you bring this up because I don't talk about this very much, but I am definitely like actively dependent on Kratom ever since I first started taking it.
Yeah.
And so all the things you described, like needing to redose and all of that, like it's been a thing for me for a while. And it actually helped me back off of weed initially, which I was a everyday, all day smoker. And then I got to the point where I'll just wait till the end of the night or at least the second half of the day if I'm just like not actually doing anything for that day. And then it really helped me focus. And I was having back pain and working a server job at a restaurant. And so if you're in pain and irritable, you're not going to give the best customer service. And then when you work for tips, you're depending on like bringing your A game and like, you know, doing your best and being talkative. And then Kratom was helping me with all of that at once. And then it at that time too, this was probably about 2017. All the articles you could ever read about Kratom just said like, it's a miracle plant, not addictive. Like, and I feel resentful about that because it was dishonest. And I feel like if we're going to do substances, have this freedom, we need radical honesty about this kind of thing.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, it's been a thing for me. I've been kind of like tapering down, but anytime I'll like actually just try to stop taking Kratom is very, very uncomfortable. And luckily it's not as dangerous as like another opioid, and I've never really like messed with any of that. So
no, dude,
take what you will.
Yeah, no, like thank you for your honesty with that, man, for real, you know, because I'm sure like you are not the only person dealing with that. First of all, there's people dealing with different types of addictions to different varying degrees of intensity at all times, you know what I mean? But like Kratom addiction, from what I've seen, at least from the internet and just from talking to individuals, it's prevalent, you know, and it's real. And if you like, you know, it seems like for some people, they claim that they can kind of shake it like no big deal. But then other people are like, no, dude, like it's, you know, it's just as severe as any other sort of addiction I've had. And so like with that sort of like cycle you got going on there, dude, like what is it that you typically experience? Because one of the things that I've noticed from being addicted to weed is that like there's desirable things that I look for within the experience. Like I think weed is a massively enjoyable experience, and that's something that like draws me to it over and over again. Is I really enjoy the experience in itself, you know. But then eventually, just like physiologically, you get to this point where it's like the experiences that you're having are less and less enjoyable and noticeable, and the sort of like window that you get is shorter and shorter. And then there starts to be this like feeling of a need for redosing. You know what I'm saying? And then and then before you know it, all of a sudden you're in this place where you're either like, say, smoking weed or taking Kratom, not really to like have this experience and to enjoy it for like that thing anymore. It's just like, I'm just taking this so I don't have to like go through withdrawals today, you know?
Yeah. It's crazy, man. And yeah, you nailed it completely. And this is actually my first time experiencing that, because I really did not mess with any substances, you know, until I was about 17 or 18. Then I got into weed. Then I got into psychedelics, smoked a bunch of weed. And then someone just offered me Kratom one time, and I was working my restaurant shift. And then I just felt this like sense of ease that I felt like I was like, oh, it made me realize how many like things were happening at the subconscious level that were making me uncomfortable, you know, like little like social anxieties, little like pain. And then whenever I felt that melt away, I felt present, and I was like, oh, is this what like normal people feel like? Is this what actual functional people feel like?
Yeah.
Because it was like this, it was like, oh, I feel like I can live now and like conquer some of my fears. You know, I had a lot of social anxiety, you know, feeling like a psychedelic alien ape creature. And which I still do, but I'm rocking it now.
That's
so like
that's one thing I've noticed. Yeah, dude, I think you nailed it too, man. Like what you just said there about like I noticed like the anxiety was gone, and I noticed it's like when the anxiety is gone, you didn't know you had it that bad, and then when you're removed from it, even within like a say a 3 to 4 hour long like Kratom experience, even within that 3 to 4 hours, being removed from it just enough to see it, it's like, oh shit, like I don't want to live like that. Like to feel that it's possible to not have anxiety, because that's one thing like I've dealt with almost my entire life, and I'm still dealing with, and I think it's gotten better, but it's just fucking anxiety, dude. You know, and the biggest thing for me, like with that, is honestly living like consistently staying consistent with like mindfulness practices. You know what I'm saying? Like that is one of the biggest like things that kind of like move that needle for me in that area. But yeah, man, the I know what you're talking about there, about you fall in love with it because of the sense of ease it gives you and the ability to like go through your normal life without that anxiety. Cause it's insane, dude. Like the amount of like work I can get done if I've optimized myself to sit down and have like 3 to 4 hours to really be in a flow state. Like if I've like, but that it seems like it takes a lot for me to get there, man. Like it's like I can't just roll out of bed and like do that. Like I gotta like work out, and I gotta like meditate, and I gotta like hit my little sauna thing, and I get it's kind of crazy, but yeah, dude.
Yeah.
And then trying to like quit or cut back a little bit, it's this rebound effect and this rubber band effect where it's like that anxiety is like, not only is it present again, but it's like even worse than before almost sometimes. And it's like, oh, I'm still expected to keep up with my sort of like normal responsibility in life. And like when you live under the fog, and maybe fog isn't the right word, but when you live under like the umbrella of something like that, like whether it be like me with weed or you with Kratom, it's like we take on a certain identity that comes with like that constant interaction with that particular substance, and that identity sometimes can get like validated through others, and and then all of a sudden you feel like this need to like cling on to that identity because you don't want people like to, that's one thing people talk about a lot with like alcohol, is they're like, people like who I am when I'm on alcohol. So I'm sure Kratom is similar, and it's, yeah, dude.
Yeah, no, that's all very good points. Yeah, I don't know. For me, I feel like going back to what you were saying a little bit earlier, I think if I would have known that there were other ways to manage what I was going through, like, because it wasn't my first option, like my back pain was really painful. That was like a really big part of it for me. I was having this regular back pain. I thought something like it was like a slip disc or something like that, but now I think it was just some muscular thing. But I would do like the back stretches and the back exercises. So I was like trying to manage it in that way. But when something just like makes it that easy, and then you're just trying to live your life, go throughout your day, it's like it became too convenient. And but now I feel like I could have handled a lot of this stuff, like the anxiety too. Like I think that with the proper amount of exercise and maybe even supplementing something like magnesium and getting a lot of sunlight and all these things that I've learned more recently, I feel like if I would have just applied that, I probably wouldn't have gotten this far into it. And I think what you do, if you are going to use Kratom, that the way that you go about it is honestly the way I would recommend, because I didn't have a like dependency on it until I started doing it more than like twice a week, I would say. So I feel like once a week and you're good. Oh, lost him.
Dude, I swear, like, I probably haven't had an internet outage like that the entire, like, last month I've been trying to have you on, and then I have you on. It's like, but,
it's
okay.
The trickster gods.
Yeah, dude, it's the jesters in the DMT realm. Okay, so.
Yep.
Okay, looks like it's recording still. Yeah, what do you remember we were talking about, man?
Yeah, just how, like,
Kratom.
I didn't have any dependency problem with it until I started taking it more than once or twice a week. So I feel like the way you do it is actually like, if you're gonna use Kratom, that's probably the best way to go. And so I was telling you this, and then it froze, and I was like, dang, he's like really zen right now, because your facial expression was just like blank, or just like wasn't moving because you were frozen. You know how you can't tell at first?
Yeah, so he's taking so much acid in his life. He's just so present. He's so present right now. Yeah. No, dude, it's I think what you're saying is important, because there's certain drugs that have come to market or become more mainstream that I noticed have been glorified, not like fully honestly talked about. And I think the two biggest ones off the top of my head are like Kratom, like you're describing. It was sort of like, yeah, this miracle plant, and you won't get addicted. And there's it is a lot safer and is a lot better option than other traditional opiates for most people, but it does have like its addiction potential and, drawbacks to it. And same thing with weed, man. Weed is definitely glorified in this way of just like, it's my medicine. And like for some people, I know that it legitimately is, like certain ailments and mental disorders potentially, but I think there's a lot of people who claim it to be their medicine who like actually have an unhealthy relationship with it. And I've witnessed this. I can say this with some confidence because I've been one of those people, and I've seen this in like close friends and stuff. And there is some like legitimate like action going on with your neurotransmitters, especially dopamine, whenever you're smoking weed. So yeah.
Yeah. That reminds me of something that happened, or something that my friend said one time. He was part of our crew where we would like regularly smoke and hotbox the car and stuff. And I'd be like, yo, do you want to smoke? And he'd be like, yeah, bro, I'm not addicted. I'm just always down, which is funny at the time. But like, it turns out, yeah, actually he was addicted. And he has since gone to rehab for other things, not for weed, but like that just shows like how we do these mental gymnastics. And that comes from a culture of not being honest, like on all fronts. So yeah, I think one step is just like putting better information out there. Same thing with like talking about the risks of psychedelics. Like you got to be honest about that.
Yeah, and I think, yeah, dude, it's so much of it is like misunderstanding, because you think about like addiction and how people usually like their frame of reference for addiction is like this person tweaking out in an alley somewhere. Like that's their, for a lot of people that might be a bit of an exaggeration, but I do think for a large amount of people that is how they view it, and like that's how they've kind of like compartmentalized it. But like there is like so many people who deal with these varying degrees of addiction, and it can look like a whole bunch of different, it can look like a lot of different things, man. And like weed addiction is like prevalent, it's like normalized. So similar to the same way that I think like alcoholism gets normalized by our society and stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, that's so true. And I think it's important to remember like how different it looks for everybody. Cause like you talked about the forums, the Reddit forums about quitting Kratom and stuff. Like I've seen all of that too. And it seems like for some people, yeah, it's like not an issue. They can even take it daily and then just stop and then nothing. Whereas some people, I don't know, maybe it's like some kind of my little theory on this is that we have like deficiencies, and that our immune or no our nervous system is on fire, and so we're just finding all these various things that can just like pour water on a like screaming nervous system.
Yeah.
And so that's what I think weed does, and alcohol actually does that as well. It acts on the GABA receptors, so there's that anti-anxiety part of it. But I actually want to, keep a balance here, because it was actually because of using kratom that I was able to quit alcohol, and that is huge for me because I'm a musician, and in musician culture and like playing shows and stuff, it's always at a bar, and then you're about to go on stage in front of people and then talk to a bunch of people. So it's like it's begging you to like have a few drinks, and then once you get to two or whatever, then you feel less inhibition to talk to people, but less inhibition to drink more or whatever. So and I was like playing these shows with my band, and then when you drink, you feel like you did great. And then I would listen to it and I'd be like, it sounds like shit. Like it felt good, but it sounded horrible. And so I was like, I want to actually be good at what I'm doing and not like fooling myself into thinking that I'm good at it. And so Kratom was actually able to like substitute that. I would be able to take it and it would reduce the anxiety of social situations. And to me, it's a better option than alcohol, just because, for one, alcohol can be so much like sloppier and like crazy. And to me, it was about like making bad decisions. You know what I mean? Like you act on your impulses when you drink. And so I got to like give it credit for that at least. And another thing too is that if you're with people that are drinking, it almost gives you this like secondhand buzz, because it's like they're all uninhibited and like feeling good and talking, and it's like then you can just open up. So that's what I've noticed as someone who no longer drinks.
Yeah, no, I've noticed that too about kratom. It was like it didn't, compared to something like alcohol, which like you said has this sort of sloppy feel to it. Kratom, you could get into a place where you felt a lot of that euphoria and desirable effects, but at the same time you're still very like radically present and capable. You know what I mean? And I think it's like this, like with, once again, with kratom and weed, I think it's easy for people to get pulled into the cycle of it and the trap of it, because it's so, you can do it for so long and for so many days in a row consecutively without there really being very many, if any, negative like effects or consequences.
Sure.
And then it's this thing where it's like the consequences, you either like realize it all at once, or like by the time that they start to come to fruition, you know, some of the blowbacks and the trade-offs, it's like you're under the physiological hook of it, you know, and it's hard to get out from underneath it, you know. But yeah, Kratom does have real like pain killing like abilities, man. Like I remember like a few weeks ago, I have this reoccurring neck injury that's like some sort of ligament or joint or whatever, something crazy. I injured my neck really bad in the football game my freshman year of high school, and just ever since then it'll randomly flare up, and it can be very painful, dude, to the point like where like I've had to call out of work before because I just like basically am bedridden. I woke up a few weeks ago, I guess I slept on it wrong or something, just this massive shooting pain down my neck, and it feels like you can barely walk. It feels like your neck is just being crunched and crushed, you know. And so I went into my kitchen, dude, and I started throwing back a few dry scoops of Kratom because I was like, this is what, like, this is my medicine for the day. And it truly was a lifesaver, like a godsend. Like within about 45 minutes, I was able to like get out of bed and sit at my computer and do some work and not be in total fucking awful pain, you know?
Right. Yeah. And I think for like emergency purposes in extreme situations like that, or even recreationally, but like every once in a while, it can be, I think that's the way it should be used, if at all. But if you're someone who like thinks you might get hooked or something, then I would just recommend not doing it at all. But
so have you toyed with like quitting at all? Have you like tried and like failed? Have you like researched any sort of like supplements or anything that might make quitting easier? Like what's that journey been like for you, man?
For sure. I've done all of that. So there's a supplement called agmatine. Have you ever heard of that?
Yeah, dude. Isn't that an NMDA antagonist as well? Like slight. I'm sorry.
I'm
continue.
not sure, man.
I have heard of it though. Yeah,
I'm not sure. So one of the things it does is it's a vasodilator. So it could actually be used as like a workout supplement, and it actually has like mood boosting effects and like increases your appetite, and it increases your tolerance. Decreases your tolerance to kratom and other opioids. So
some people claim it lowers your weed tolerance too. But continue. Sorry.
Maybe I haven't noticed that, but it's possible. So I take that regularly, and so that's been able to like keep it under control. And I've been tapering and like winning and losing battles because like I've tried to just jump off the cliff a few times. It was actually because I was taking this agmatine stuff that like I felt cravings actually go away in a span of time that I didn't expect it to, you know. I'm like, oh, I actually feel totally normal. I'm completely sober and I don't feel the need for it. And I'm like, I think I'm good. So I was like, let me just try not taking it. But then sure enough, like hours later, it feels like I don't know how to describe it. I feel it in my arms. It feels like the inside of your arms is just like it's like this internal itch you can't scratch or something.
Interesting. No, I was about to ask you what that feels like. I was about to ask you what that feels like, the days where it's like you're trying to quit or cut back, and it's like, what does that withdrawal feel like, dude?
It feels, well, that's one of the main things. Another thing too is I get really tired, and then my eyes will start watering, and I will feel like just like something isn't right, like something isn't correct. I feel restless. I feel overly energetic. Anxiety hasn't been like a big part of that, which I think it is for a lot of people who maybe like treat their anxiety with that. But yeah, it's severely uncomfortable, and I'll get really emotional actually, because something about numbing yourself physically with an analgesic is you're numbing your emotions too. And I'm like a very, like I'm like a a guy who's in his feels a lot. You know, I write songs. I'll cry. You know, I don't care. And even then, I feel like I'm not muting my emotions completely. But then, whenever I go long enough without kratom, I'll feel all of these like the tiniest perceptions, the edge of your perception, those like super small emotions that are just like the tiniest little details. Those are the things that get muted, and I just feel all of that coming back. And I'm like, oh, there's this like extra layer of richness that I've been denying myself.
Yeah.
But I still feel like I'm getting maybe like 95%. So it's not like I'm a robot and not feeling anything, but it's that extra little bit. And oh yeah, and you can forget about going to sleep whenever you're experiencing these withdrawals. And so it's really opened my mind in a way that I didn't know before. Like, I have so much more compassion for people that are going through something like this, because it just like doesn't click in your brain what it's like what you said. You might just think, oh, it's some tweaker who just doesn't have self-control, and it's just like maybe like sugar or something that they just always want. But it's like, no, like you don't feel well unless like you're not at baseline anymore. You're like below baseline until you can again. And it's crazy, man. Yeah, it's crazy. So I've continued to try to quit. I've tried jumping off the ledge twice, and both times I gave in when I was trying to go to sleep. That was what it was, because I could deal with all that crazy feeling when I was awake, but I was just sitting there like 2:30 in the morning, just like rolling around, and it was hell, dude. So like, props to anybody who's been able to do that. I'm continuing to like do other supplements too. Like I mentioned magnesium earlier.
Yeah.
There's magnesium. There's one called theanine, which is good for like anxiety.
Yeah.
And so it's like there's all these things that if I would have just done that first, I wouldn't have even like reached for that. So so with all of that said, jumping off the cliff, I've tried. So now I'm just continuing to like taper lower and lower, but my tolerance will like make a jump up or make a jump down, and it's kind of hard to know when that's going to happen. So it's something I'm actively dealing with. And yeah.
No, I feel like addiction is incredibly complex, and I feel like a lot of times I've witnessed, because I've had to, like, a part of my whole court thing, I had to go to rehab and stuff like that, and I've been, I had to like do AA stuff, and even just like the system of probation and parole itself, and a lot of these like inpatient rehab programs, it's a revolving door of recidivism. And like a lot of people in there, even like the craziest people you'd meet, with like the craziest addictions, like they know like it, like, yeah, I mean, it's like an issue, and like, I wish I didn't have to live like this. But like I knew this one guy who was a tattoo artist, and he was just an extremely talented artist in general, and a very lovable person, very lovable guy. But he used to tell me all the time that like the first thing he was going to do when he got out was like stick a needle in his arm. He's big into heroin. And like,
Dang.
yeah, and like he had been sober for, like 18 something months because he had been locked up. And so it's like that far removed from it. And he was like, yep, the first thing I'm going to do, like whenever I get out, is stick a needle in my arm, Yeah.
Yeah. That's like, yeah, you mentioned the complexity of it all. I think there's so many layers. There's like the physiological layer, and then there's like more of an experiential layer where it's just like you want to, because it's like after 18 months, I'm sure most of the like actual cravings and like the physiological desires probably aren't as prevalent, if they're even there at all. It's more of just like, oh, now this is the thing I want to do and experience again.
Yeah. Well,
So
that thing you said earlier too about like, I feel like a lot of it comes from deficiencies. Like, yeah, like, when I look at people, and once again, when I say I look at people, like I'm talking to myself too and about myself, but people who have struggled with addiction, one thing I ask myself constantly is like, if this had been like addressed at the root and at the start in a very like crazily like comprehensive holistic manner, you know, would that have like helped nip it in the bud for most people? Because, you know, like I think for most people, when it comes to things like depression and anxiety, you know, I feel like if you're not doing the basic things like, you know, getting sunlight and drinking enough water and like eating decently healthy and having like meaningful work to do and like good relationships in your life, like if you're not taking care of those things, playing the sort of like, you know, neurotransmitter balancing game with different compounds, like, you know, I think there is a time and place for that, but I think it's overdone massively within our country, within our sort of Western society here. And I see this, you know, I've seen this in people I love. So they try to do it to me with like Adderall, you know, and I you know, whenever it's like things start to get out of whack for me, man, like it's, I mean, there is external things, right, that are like, that'll always be a part of life, and we shouldn't be like deny that and live in like illusion of that, you know. But like just taking care of myself and like getting my internal into like a good place seems to always like help soothe out the external a bit, you know. But it's yeah.
No, I think that's right, man. There's life is so traumatizing. So like it makes sense that people don't want to just raw dog reality, you know? Like I'm not making an excuse here. I'm just saying, like, let's be real. Like life is insanely crazy and traumatic. And like there's stuff going on in my life too, like at that time, which involved a lot of like trauma and so it's like I went even deeper maybe than I needed to, just because of all of that stuff. So it's like we really have to like find a good way to build ourselves a foundation, you know, internally, externally, you know, like all the things that you were talking about in order to fortify us better. Because it's like we're going to have these storms. We're going to have like life is going to never go the way that we just planned from the outset. So it's like, how do we handle all of that? And I feel like we need a holistic approach. Like I just completely agree with what you're saying. Like we need all the exercise, the like relationships in your life, good diet, supplements if you need them. Whereas we're just like, oh, this thing's wrong with you. Take this. You know, it's such a it's sad because our entire mental and physical health is like being played with at the whims of market forces. You know what I mean? Because there's money to be made in that, and I don't even think it's like pharma is like inherently evil, but it's just like when the profit motive comes first before the well-being of people, and there's profit incentives, and like they have incentives to prescribe this stuff, like the whole opioid crisis, blah blah blah. So it's messed up. So I feel like anyone who's going through this kind of thing should give themselves like a lot of compassion, and others who are experiencing it, because like it ain't easy out here.
Yeah, no, and it require like by having been through it yourself, that gives you like a different level of that compassion too, man. Yeah, no, it's because yeah, I see it too. Like, and I empathize with it. And I think the biggest thing for a lot of people is like I think most people intuitively, either like subconsciously or consciously, know that providing themselves that sort of platform and giving themselves like healthier options is a sort of like way out. I think most people know this, you know, but it's a matter of like doing that work and like getting out of the funk and like getting the positive momentum and keeping momentum in a way. And I think when you're living underneath something, you know, and you don't even have to be addicted to anything. Some people just have like hard lives, you know, like you're saying, like life can be hard, you know? And so, so I think a lot of people struggle with making that leap and that shift and that change. And enter psychedelics into the chat. You know what I'm saying? Like, and that's not for everybody, for sure. For sure, it's not for everybody. But like that, for me, man, like that's been like one of the biggest like ways that I've used them as a tool is like, all right, like a catalyst for change. You know what I mean? Like this extreme.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Would you say that, didn't you mention that like either a DMT trip you had or a mushroom trip, it like brought up the subject of weed for you?
Yeah, man. I've received the message multiple times from DMT of like, hey, you have a problematic relationship with weed. Like I've gotten that multiple times. And that usually is like, has been the times in my life where it's just been this very like unconscious habitual thing, and like, I'll be honest, like it's something I still struggle with. It's gotten a lot better. And like I've hit these strides. And, I remember, right after our last like psych tubers, panel discussion, the one that me and you were on like a couple months ago, it was like 2 or 3 months ago now, but, I quit weed like right before that. I was like going through withdrawals while we recorded that. And then I like was clean. Wow. Yeah, I was clean for like another few weeks after that or something like that, like just really like, just was like taking this break from weed. And I remember in that Psych Tubers panel discussion, Loka mentioned a time in his life where he quit weed, and he said for about 3 months straight, it felt like he was tripping. And you were talking about this earlier with like trying to quit Kratom. It's like you feel so deeply, get very emotional. That's something that I was experiencing like during our like podcast, because I was going through it, and then like the weeks afterwards was this like having had quit from like being a daily multiple times a day user for so long, and then just like quitting. Once I broke through the sort of like very tough like few day long physiological withdrawals, I started like riding this weird like high that lasted a few weeks, man. Like it was this very natural high that felt like I was riding this roller coaster of emotions. Like I was just at all these tens and ones, and I was like, I was loving it and hating it at the same time. And I was revisiting and like addressing, like you said, some of these emotions that I had buried for so long. And it's funny because as somebody who like regularly sits in ceremony, you would think that like maybe these things would come to light with the help of the mushroom, or even the dimethyltryptamine or whatever it is. But no, it was like being sober from weed brought up some like serious like childhood like traumas that I spent.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, dude, there was like this like 48 to 72 hour period where I was like feeling some type of way about people in my life who I love very much. And I still do, but it was like I was having, for whatever reason, it was like this odd like time that the universe decided I was going to unpack some, like I said, some like childhood traumas. But yeah, I thought that was really interesting that I experienced that sort of like natural high from quitting, or like whatever it was. And you talked about experiencing it. Loka talked about experiencing it. Jake quit weed around the same time that I did, and he was telling me he was experiencing the same thing. But I've like started and quit weed many times now. One thing I noticed is like I always get that like there's like this 2 to 3 week window of like euphoria and like manic behavior, but then there's like this blowback from that too. It's like I was flying too close to the sun and like burned my wings. So yeah.
Yeah. I wonder what that is. It's like this. There's this internal pendulum in our minds, in our bodies, in our souls, where it's like once it's able to swing back a certain way, it just goes, and you're just at the mercy of it.
Yeah, one thing I've like theorized and kind of thought about is I remember I was talking to a friend one time who was on SSRIs and had been on SSRIs for like several years. And I just like was, I was curious because I'd never taken SSRIs myself. And I was like, what does it feel like to be on an SSRI? And he described it to me like this, and I thought it was pretty interesting. He said, like in life, we have a lot of like these like tens and ones, like I was saying earlier, like this roller coaster of emotions. And I think most people go through this, like this sort of spectrum like that between tens and ones, but he was like, he was like on SSRIs, he was like, it's like I'm always at like a 6, he was like, it never gets really bad. He was like, but it never gets really great either. And when he said that, I started thinking about my own relationship to weed. And I was like, that's honestly like when I get into the habit of smoking weed, like every single day, multiple times a day, it gets to the point where it is kind of like this like little like SSRI that I'm smoking, where I'm just like, my life is at this constant like 6 or 7. And everything
stabilizer.
Yeah, it's like this stabilizer, and everything's constantly okay, but nothing's ever amazing. Do you know what I mean? And I can see how something like Kratom, heck, even alcohol, and some of these other substances can get like that, can kind of act like that SSRI like effect.
Yeah, I actually heard that there's a study or something that came out, or at least an article that I saw, where it said how people who regularly use weed are less likely to be like blown away by a new experience. And I was like, that's kind of crazy, because like to me, those things go hand in hand, where it's like, oh, I'm going to go see the pyramids. Like, let me get stoned for this. Or like, oh, I'm going to see this amazing concert. Let me enhance that. So there's this weird, but I think it might have to do with that stabilizer effect. And yeah, I was going to say something else about that. I don't know. It'll come back to me.
Yeah. Yeah, dude, I had a really embarrassing brain fart a minute ago, so don't feel bad about it. I had so much good to say, dude. Like, and it's funny because I don't know if you do this too. Like, you'll be talking, and I'm listening to you, and I'm taking it all in. You know what I'm saying? But you'll say something, I'm like, oh, I have a perfect thing to say about that, and I try and archive it, and then you'll get to talking more, and I lose it, and then I'm like listening to you, I'm like, fuck, what was I thinking about a second ago? Forget it.
Yep. That's exactly what just happened to me, man. Yeah, and I still have like 2 things from the back burner of like what you were saying earlier. Like we were talking about like psychedelics entering the chat, and how like you would think some stuff would come up on psychedelics because it tends to just like force you whatever you need but don't want to see. And I like every time I take mushrooms, there's part of me that wonders, like, is the Kratom thing going to come up? And I was like, dude, are the mushrooms judging this? Like, do they? Because I feel like they would show me if they thought I was like,
if it
was a problem.
Have you gotten the message?
Never had.
Interesting.
No.
Interesting.
I'll usually take Kratom on the come down of my trips too. Like, I'll not have any during. But yeah, during the come down, and I'll still be tripping, and I'll be like weighing out my dose, and I'll be like, is the mushroom, are y'all going to say anything? Like, is this what's going on? And I'm just nothing. But I also wonder if it has to do with like, I need to set that as an intention. Because, I hear about people quitting alcohol, cigarettes, but I feel like they go into it with that intention.
Yeah, no, I had Trip Whip on like a couple nights ago, dude, and me and him were just talking about this, like intention setting with psychedelics. And, like that's something I've been thinking about, because it's like, since the beginning, since I first got into like this space, of course, that's like one of the buzzwords that you'll catch on to right away is, intention. And like intentions are super important. And there is, I think like that, the whole idea of setting intentions is applicable to like life, not just psychedelics, but I've noticed, dude, like there's been so many times that I've like written down like a list of like a few different intentions or things that I might want to explore, just to like kind of keep a blueprint to refer back to in case I think things get muckied up or confusing or whatever it is, but it seems like pretty reliably the mushrooms, or just my psychedelic experiences in general, like give me this like sort of story will play out, like this like little mini hero's journey within a few hour time span will play out in my psyche. And most of the time I feel like as long as like, all right, I'm somewhere like safe and like warm and like, I can kind of just like take them and with like the good faith that whatever it is that I'm like feeling at that point in my life, I'm going to feel deeper into, and I think there's also the element sometimes of like balancing it, of like setting your intentions, but also like being open to what I was just describing, like, the fact that sometimes there is just these things that come up and that's okay. Maybe we just feel into that. Cause I think that if people go into it with the notion that like I set these intentions, like this is what I have to address, there can be a sort of like, you're not meeting those expectations and it can be a sort of letdown in a way. But I also like what you're talking about. Like this is something I've thought about in my sober life and I've contemplated and, I'm on the fence about. I think that it could be a very powerful tool for you, in this instance to like try and gear your mind towards that. Like, do I want to like keep taking Kratom? Do I feel bad about like, what should I, you know what I mean?
Well, I mean, part of me doesn't need mushrooms to know that I don't want to do, I don't want to keep living like this where I have to like, feel uncomfortable and then go take some and feel good again. And, but I still think that there would be value in doing that. And, what's interesting is that, they talk about iboga, and it supposedly has this magical ability to like reset your opioid receptors. And so I tried looking up, like, have people done that for Kratom? And they have iboga practices in Mexico, and I'm in Texas, so not too far for me. And so I've considered that, but I'm also like a little bit sketched out about iboga because I heard there's some like things with like heart issues. I don't know, like
there's some
it seems
physiological,
like there's dangers there.
Yeah, there is some potential like physiological dangers with iboga, but most places like that you're talking about, it's usually like a retreat/clinic thing, and they do usually do like a brief medical screening, which is supposed to like really negate most of the risks. Not that it doesn't carry risks, but yeah, dude, I think that the iboga thing would be awesome because I have heard that too, that it's something special about it. Helps people with addiction in general, but it's something in particular about helping people with opiate addictions, and that, but like at the same time, that's not one that like I've explored. And I think that because of like who you are though, dude, that'd be a really interesting one for you to explore and kind of like document it,
Yeah. It's something I've thought about there, but there's also this, there's like a sister plant to iboga. I think it's called like tabernathi or something like that. And I keep getting advertisements for it on Instagram. And apparently people are using it for the same way or for the same purpose.
Interesting.
So I might just try that, but it would make like an epic story to like go down to Mexico and like have this intervention. But, yeah, I don't know. I'm not at that point right now.
But I was about to say, dude, if you're going to do that, you got to first like get into the alley so you can take the before pictures. And then do like the whole like after for the thumbnail, like before with Kratom, after iboga, like that type of dealio.
I know. Yeah, I need to just start writing the YouTube video script for it right now.
Yeah. Well, that's iboga's a weird one, man, because like from what I understand, that's a completely different type of journey, and it's very long, and most people talk about how it's like very harrowing, like it's very like you're in the shit, it can be very challenging. People talk about that a lot,
Yeah, but have you ever heard any of the traditional Bwiti harp music?
I don't think I have, but I remember watching the episode of Hamilton's Pharmacopoeia where he went and did, was it with the Bwitis that he did the iboga?
It might have been. Yeah, it might have been. So I don't remember like the music from that episode. I've seen that too. But yeah, the Bwiti is like one of the prominent tribes that does iboga, and they have these like harp instruments. but they're playing it like super fast, and it's like the most energetic form of like ceremonial music that I've ever heard. So imagine that on top of like what is purportedly a harrowing experience, and you just hear this like guy like going nuts on the harp. It's like really insane, but like I'm fascinated by that. Like I kind of want to do that.
Yeah, in that traditional sort of context like that too, dude. Like that's one thing I've
Mm-hmm.
noticed is that, like, okay, in general, just in life in general, I've noticed the dramatic impact that music has on my mood. Like, dude, I have no issues right now, but if I listen to like, if I went on YouTube right now and found like the saddest song I knew, I could legitimately like get into a really bad place and start to cry. I could also play something that amps me up, and this is completely sober, you know? So it's like, but
Mm-hmm.
within the psychedelic experience, the music that I've played, like some of my favorite artists, you know, like Parangi and Liquid Bloom and stuff like that, like those guys, then the synergy between some music and psychedelics, it's I've noticed it has such this like crazy effect. And one thing in particular is like playing certain songs when I smoke DMT, there can be like this almost like this feeling that the song is helping like with the transition into it. I don't know. You know?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Oh, absolutely, dude. I'm a firm believer that the combination of music and psychedelics is like a cosmic cocktail of epic proportions. Like there's almost nothing more powerful than the right song, the right moment, the right substance, all intertwining at the same time. And it's been a part of all of my biggest, like most impactful trips, including the big initial trip that I had that was like classic textbook definition of a mystical experience, and it's the reason that I like got so into this stuff. So that's something I actually wanted to like ask you about. I heard your story about like discovering DMT, so I kind of know your story a little bit, but I guess I want to dig into a little bit more like with other content creators around psychedelic stuff. I like to ask them like, what makes you so fascinated by all of it as opposed to like a casual enjoyer? You know what I mean? Like we're people who would go far enough to like make videos about this stuff are like not just someone who's like, oh yeah, I like mushrooms, they're fun. You know, it's like we're in
Yeah,
this world,
we're
you
like
know.
an autistic level about it, buddy. Like we really took it to
Yes.
another level. Yeah, no, dude. I actually have that written down. Like I wanted to ask you that too. Like what I mean, so
uh,
you're also a psychedelic content creator. Like what made you want to like start sharing some of this with the world? You know what I'm saying? Because it's a weird thing to talk about, and sort of like it's almost like coming out of the closet in a way, like being like, I do
totally,
drugs and I think that they can be beneficial. It's this weird like,
totally.
but yeah, man. Like what really got me was like, I guess and I'll just start from the beginning like an evil villain, you know? But no, just
Okay.
like from the beginning, like as a teenager, I felt this very special connection to cannabis, like when I started interacting with it in high school. And I think that stemmed from like, and I didn't have the verbiage to describe it or even maybe like the wherewithal to like tell myself like this is what I like about it. But it was the sort of like introspectiveness of it, like in the sort of
Hmm.
solace, you know. And I had like a weird sort of like adolescent like childhood. It's not like a pity party or anything. I think everybody does, you know. Everybody has their traumas, but like I found some solace within that introspective haze of cannabis as a teenager, and I really found this deep love and appreciation for altered states of consciousness. And this is like back in like around like 2014 when I started smoking cannabis daily as a teenager in high school. So, you know, this
Hmm.
is when like the weed science was still kind of big and the push for legalization of weed was still pretty big. And, you know, I just remember like getting really wrapped up in like the science and the politics and the history of it all. And I was like, this is fucking
Hmm.
fascinating. And I just thought that like
Hmm.
cannabis was the most fucking fascinating thing in the world. And of course, like I had a lot of friends who also loved it and like appreciated it. But I noticed that like once again, I took it to like this different level of just like, you know, like really being like obsessive about it. And I've had that personality since I was a child of like, I find things that I really like and I get obsessive about them, like very ADHD like, you know, which I think is not necessarily a bad thing. I think it can be a strength if you play it right. But anyways, you know, so I knew I liked the altered states of consciousness. Somewhere around like 17 or 18 years old, the idea of DMT and just psychedelics in general got planted in my mind from like listening to podcasts, and in particular the Joe Rogan podcast. When I heard him talk about DMT, it just like planted this seed in my mind. And I knew, like, I was like, I'm going to experiment. Like, I'm going to interact with that, you know, but I didn't really go like searching for it. It was kind of odd. Instead, I actually spent like a solid like year, like really doing a lot of meditation and like finding a practice with that and like implementing that into my daily life. And then in this weird sort of way, it felt like DMT came to me. I was 19 and I had a friend at work approach me and it was just like, hey man, like, I know this guy, he has DMT, you know, here's his phone number. It's like, okay. So I like texted this guy that I'd never met. It was like, you know, heard you got DMT, man. Like, I could try it. And he was like, yeah, man, like you can come over after your shift. You know, I was delivering pizzas at the time as a college student. And I was like, okay, awesome. So I went over that night and had my first psychedelic experience, and it was with DMT. And that experience in itself, man, it was funny because like at first there was this sort of like geometric colors and shapes and stuff. And then the sort of like most interesting thing that happened within that trip was that like I was like in this like black void and there was this doorway in front of me, and like protruding out of like the cracks in the doorway was like this like white light, you know, and I knew that like on the other side of the doorway, like something spectacular like awaited me. But I also knew that I had like not smoked enough DMT to really get there, you know, because we had like sandwiched it in between weed and a hand pipe, and like I did the whole like 3 hits deal, like they had to feed me the third hit, that type of thing, you know. But I knew like I hadn't smoked enough DMT to get there. So I like, came out of that DMT experience like just feeling like really rebooted and like refreshed, and like really like it was like that interest in like peak in psychedelics just like took into another level. And I like started like experimenting very heavily and procuring a lot of different types of psychedelics. You know, like I did, obviously mushrooms, LSD, 2CB, you know, I was doing like Robitussin, did some salvia, did a bunch of DMT, did some 5-MeO DMT, did MDMA a few times, like really just like a lot of experimentation, and a lot of it in this very like, a lot of it was done in this hedonistic manner until I got like these hard like lessons, you know, within the experience. But yeah, man. And then within all of this, like my own personal experimentation, I just got lost in this weird lifestyle. And I started like, I had always sold weed, like small amounts, like pretty much since like my senior year of high school to like friends and stuff. And then when I went to college, I was selling like a little bit more weed just because, you know, your network expands a little bit and stuff. But I wasn't like a big time dealer, you know. But when I started doing psychedelics like this and procuring them, and I learned how to use the dark web and stuff, I just started getting all these psychedelics in, and I started selling a lot of psychedelics. Before I knew it, I fell into this place where I was like a full-time like psychedelic drug dealer, you know, doing a lot of psychedelic drugs. And then I was also hosting these like underground DMT ceremonies in my apartment that I coined and I called the launch pad. And so you see it coming full circle here. My apartment where I sold psychedelic drugs and did psychedelic drugs and facilitated psychedelic experiences, I called the launch pad. And then I ended up getting raided and popped and hit with criminal charges.
Dang.
Yeah, dude. And then I had to do a little bit of time and like deal with supervision, community supervision and stuff like that, and being in the system in general. And so like, but whenever I got out of jail, I just remember being like, all right, I'm done selling drugs. You know what I mean? Like that's not the life I want to live. You know, like at the objective level of reality, I honestly didn't see anything wrong with it because it was like, like I understand, like I'm reagent testing all the shit that I'm getting. I'm getting it from very like reputable vendors. I'm taking it myself. Also, all of the drugs that I've sold have like very good safety profiles with like a large therapeutic potential. On top of that, every person I'm interacting with, I'm like educating as much as I am, just as autistic as I am on my YouTube channel. It's like truly I did not have any sort of like guilty conscience over like what I provided to other people. It was just sort of like the downstream effects of dealing with those legal consequences, because that not only affected me, but that also affected my fucking kid, that affected my mom, affected my family. So I made that decision, like I'm done selling psychedelic drugs. But I knew at the same time, dude, I was like, this is still like the most fascinating thing in the world to me, and like the thing that I want to be involved with and like throw myself into. And so I was like, all right, like I guess podcast, YouTube channel. And so I started like sloppily making videos on my iPhone, and just like putting them out there and made like the Launchpad YouTube channel. And here in the past like few months, I've decided to like start taking it more serious and stuff. But yeah, that's sort of like my origin story, man. And I'm sorry that I just went on a long ramble, but I felt like it was sort of necessary to like set the stage for it. But please tell me your story, dude.
Yeah, well, I just want to say, like, I think that's awesome. Yeah, you kind of briefly told the story in our panel, and that's just so crazy, man, how it all turned out. So maybe we can. It might be an oversimplification, so I'm half joking here, but maybe the formula for a psychedelic YouTuber is like one big trip and a touch of the tism. You equal psychedelic YouTuber.
Yes, dude. We're a different breed.
Yeah, but I really have a lot of respect for you, man. And like, I've seen your stuff for a while now, and I've seen you kind of ramp things up recently. And like, you just have a very like poignant way of speaking about this stuff. So I just want to encourage you to keep doing your thing and like keep developing that and keep, like getting more information and like talking to other people, learning stuff, and like, you're going to be killing it, man. So yeah, keep that up.
Oh, dude, I really appreciate that, dude. Like, and I'm not just saying this like blow smoke up your ass. I tell Jake this too, because it's true. Like the quality of your content, man, is like awesome. Like, and I know how it feels. Like we were talking about in the chat of like, I can dump like 40 hours into a video and then it gets 258 views. And like, and it's not all about the views, but it is a bit disheartening, man. When like, I don't think people realize like the amount of time and energy that goes into making something like that, but like there is just that sort of like, I was telling Trip with this, I get disheartened sometimes, but then I have like one person reach out or like DM me on Instagram or like send me an email and they're like, oh, like I love this video, or I'm loving your videos, or this reminded me of this in my trip. And dude, it just like, it really makes it all like worth it to me. Like all the time that I spent on that video, like even if it was just for you, dude, like it was so worth it, man.
Yeah. Exactly. I think that's the like rational, grounded perspective on it. But like when you're in the middle of it, you got to remind yourself of stuff like that. You know what I mean? It's like, I know that already, but it's like you tend to like not remember whenever you're in the throes of like just put a video out and no one's watching it or whatever. So yeah, man. But like what we were talking about too, it's like we're building up a library too. So it's like if one video does pop off, it's going to be better to have like 80 videos on your channel as opposed to like 3 or whatever. So there's that too. And you can't predict that kind of stuff. And like, also you can just keep getting better and better. And then there'll be a point where it's like, it's going to be impossible for the almighty algorithm to ignore it. Although our situation is kind of precarious because YouTube is like a shifting ground of like what's okay to talk about, like where you get demonetized and like all this weird stuff. But here, give me 1 second.
Yeah, no, dude.
So
I've
Go ahead.
That's one thing I've been thinking about myself too, is the sort of like problems that we face as psychedelic content creators. You know, it feels like we have to walk this constant balance of like trying to be honest and authentic and transparent while also like remaining within their guidelines. You know what I mean? And uh, yeah, I've struggled with, like, for instance, TikTok, because I've had some videos on there that have like really popped off, and I've realized like, all right, this is a good way to like gain traction and stuff. And even though the videos are different and condensed, it's like I can still fit some value into like a 3-minute video. But I've had some videos that, like, as soon as I've posted them, I immediately get it taken down and get the community guidelines violation or strike added as soon as I post it. And I'm like, this video isn't any worse than the video that I have like up from 3 weeks ago that you never took down, And so it's just like, you know, and yeah, like I think that there's one thing that people in this space can talk about over and over again and kind of like beat this horse till it's dead is the sort of like problems with, the war on drugs and the sort of misconceptions and misunderstanding around a lot of these drugs. But then when you try and be like truthful and honest about it, it's sometimes you get censored just straight up, because it's
Right.
like, you're trying to, like, this is irresponsible. It's like, no, what's actually what I think is more irresponsible is you trying to like suppress any sort of education about drugs, because that's how we get through this shit. It's like education and like proper research.
Yeah. It's a total lack of nuance. And also, because the volume of videos going up on YouTube is like so vast, they made it a computer now. It's like an AI that's like, oh, I saw something. Like I had a podcast with Jake, and it got demonetized, and I don't even know what it was. And he has like a little bong in the corner, so I was like, maybe it's that. Like, the frustrating thing is they don't even tell you like what it is most of the time. It's just like, this was against the guidelines. Read the guidelines. So it is what it is. We're building a home on like rented land, I guess you could say. So I think YouTube is kind of like a good flagship, or like a good way like to get it out there. And my whole channel is all about and we could get back into the origin story stuff. My whole channel is about finding the others, right? Like the famous Tim Leary quote, Terrence McKenna re-quoted him. And so I'm discovering that that's like the most important part of my channel, is actually like fostering that. And like, so I have a Discord, and I eventually want to have like some kind of newsletter or whatever, and then eventually like have real life meetups. Like I've met a couple people from the YouTube channel who actually live in Houston, and I've like met with this guy, and he like gave me mushrooms, and now our trips are like interacting. It's like powerful stuff. So yeah, I guess I wanted, since you asked earlier, I wanted to give a little bit of the origin story tale. So for me, it was a super significant trip that happened when I was 18 years old. I took 2 hits of LSD, and this was my second time tripping. Third, if you count morning glory seeds, which all I really did was like make some stuff shiny, and my stomach really hurt. that was about the extent of it. And so I took 2 hits of LSD, and then once it started coming on, this was before I knew anything, bro. Like, I didn't know ego death was a thing. I didn't know like anything. I literally just went into it like my motivation was wanting to see pretty colors and shit. Like, I wanted to be like, I had heard like my friend talk about visual, close-eyed visuals, hallucinations, and he described it as like this geometric, flowery, colorful thing. I was like, I want to see that. So at this point in my life, I was like dabbling, and then pushing it and pushing it and pushing it, and seeing like, okay, I want to get to whatever that is. And dude, it delivered like 100%, but it wasn't like straight there, which I'll get into. So like when the trip started coming on, it was like whoa, like I got hit by a train and it was way more powerful than I had like bargained for. You know that feeling when you take a little bit too much or something, and when it hits, you're just like, oh shit, like it's going down, you know. And so that was happening to me. I was with two friends. One of them took it with me, and then the other was a good friend of mine who had some experience, and he was like our trip sitter. Which I'm so glad that he was there, because like it started coming on and I started feeling like unwell, like kind of ill. And so I had this desire to like sit down and like be on the ground. And we were outside in a suburban neighborhood in a cul-de-sac. And then it started to look like a light source was like going around. Like, have you ever experienced that on psychedelics where it's like, it looks like the shadows are like rotating. If you took a flashlight around this right now and you spun it around, you would see the shadow spinning too. It was like that was happening. And then I was like, oh my God, like I feel crazy right now. This is the most intense thing I'd felt up until then. And I felt like I was dying. And that was the really scary thing, where I was like, I was going into an ego death experience or ego dissolution, whatever you want to call it. But it felt, in this case, it actually felt like something was dying inside of me. And when you don't know what to expect, you think that you might actually be dying. Or like, let's say you forget that you took a drug. You might actually think, damn, this is it. Like I really did it. And so I was sitting on the ground, feeling like I was dying. And my friend, the trip sitter, comes up to me and he like grabs my hand, like as if I am actually on my deathbed. And he was like my best friend coming up to me being like, I'm here, you know, I'm present for you, and holding my hand. And it was like that simple act of compassion just like flipped everything around. And then once he did that, I started seeing these like arcs of white light, like going everywhere on the ground, just like a bunch of pure white light arcs. And then in between some of the nexus points of those arcs, I saw your favorite, the secret cosmic language. Uh, yeah, it was like, it was this color, the color of my lamp over here. It was like a neon green, three-dimensional. It almost looked like plasma, or like a neon sign without the glass. It was like this glowing green thing. It was about 3 feet tall off the ground, and it was like this Christmas tree structure, you know, maybe not like exactly shaped like that, but it reminded me kind of that. And it looked like a mix of like Sanskrit and Hebrew, but there was something, it was like calligraphy, and it was very orderly. It looked as if there was like something geometrical and mathematical about it. And yes, yes, exactly. And when I was looking at it, I got this sense that what I was looking at was like love. It was like the love that holds together the universe. It felt like this underlying thing that's like actually there at all times. And it was just insanely beautiful. And so that was happening. And then my friend was like, just went into shaman mode. He like became possessed, and he like found this rose bush, and he was like shaking it, and all the petals were like falling. And, you know, I was like seeing all the patterns of like how the petals connect. And then we went into a car, smoked some weed, and we were listening to the first Tame Impala album, Inner Speaker, which we were doing that regularly at the time anyway. But then this is where the trip really ramped up, as if it wasn't already. I started to feel, in the music, I could feel the tones of the earth. I felt like I could hear mud and clay, and like that feeling when you have your toes in the dirt. It was like the music equivalent of that. But because you have synesthesia, it really felt like I was actually like experiencing that texture and that feeling. And then I started to feel a fire in my stomach, and it was like this glowing internal fire, like right here. And this feeling started to like grow, and it felt connected to my hunger, like my hunger, my will to survive was there. And this fire kept growing and growing. And at one point it felt like the energy in this area of my body was like so great that it actually just had to like escape. And so it went into my heart. And then once that happened, it was like the energy got like amplified and purified in my heart center. And then it was just like this insane like cosmic consciousness experience where I like merged with the universe, and I was like closing my eyes and I could see like my actual identity of consciousness had gone cosmic. Like, you've probably had this before, and some other people have, like, you have your typical sense of boundary, like your consciousness is like here maybe, and then maybe if you're feeling open, it's like your consciousness is a little wider and you're aware of your environment. But it was like my actual consciousness was the size of like galaxies, and I was in this thing, and this energy in my heart, it was like making me feel just like immense love. And then the energy bubbled up there so much that it felt like it had to come out, and I felt this energy actually like rise up. And this whole time I felt this like serpentine thing going up my spine. And so what I realized later was that this was a Kundalini awakening experience. And I was not somebody who like wanted that to happen or even knew what the hell that was. So to me, that in a way proves it's genuine, because it just happened spontaneously to me and it happens spontaneously to others. But the main point of all of this is that that love that I felt, whatever that bliss, that cosmic sense of love was, I felt I had to express it into the world. And then from that point on, I like knew that I had a purpose on this earth, like that my purpose was to get whatever this feeling that I had on 2 hits on the peak of LSD, whatever that feeling was, getting that out there and expressing it through creativity. And now later in my life, I see that through words and the YouTube channel and stuff, that is like my actual reason to be here. And like, that's a perfect time for something like that to happen, because you're 18 years old, you're becoming an adult, it's like a rite of passage in my life that like totally changed everything for me, man. And there's more to it. I have a whole like trip report about it, but that's like the main thing. So there's a second part to this equation, which is the find the others side of this. So in 2015, I was watching a band on YouTube, and it's a band called Vinyl Williams, and they had a song called Space Age Utopia, and it was like one of these like live sessions. And I just saw that song title, Space Age Utopia, and I was like, okay, anyone who would name their song Space Age Utopia is like my kind of person. So I clicked on it, and then it was like awesome music, super psychedelic. And then I was like, dang, this is my tribe. Like, I felt a sense to like connect and reach out to these people. And I was like, these people are living true to themselves in a way that like I feel like I'm not currently doing, like going full psychedelic mode. And so years later, I actually asked the singer of this band to like do an interview, and I just wanted to pick his brain, because I'm fascinated by like where music and psychedelics kind of collide, and like how that catalyzes creativity, and the different aesthetics that come with like psychedelic art, psychedelic music, like where that is all connected. So I wanted to pick this guy's brain, because he was like one of my favorite artists, psychedelic artists. And so I asked him to do an interview, and then I got my brother to do video. But this was all just kind of like an excuse, because I literally just wanted to pick his brain. So I was like, if I make it a video interview, it's like legit, and it's like they're going to want to do it. And so I ended up talking to this guy, and then that was like how I inadvertently started my YouTube channel, is by making a video interview of this guy who is like part of this lost tribe that I felt. And then yeah, it just kind of snowballed from there. I did like I was also getting sick of my job, like teaching music and like dealing with like bratty kids and stuff like that. So I was like, let me find a way out of this like typical grind. Like YouTube seems really cool because I was also just watching tons of YouTube. Like I'm obsessed with YouTube, man. So yeah, I made a trip report video, and it actually did. It's like my most viewed video. It's like the first trip report I ever did because I knew it was a good story, so I started with that one. But yeah, man, I got inspired by the Terrence McKenna quote to like find your other people, and I have my close circle of friends, you know, that I share excitement with about this kind of stuff, but like it doesn't feel like a community or like a big enough thing. It's just like a little, it's like your buddies or whatever. So I just kind of wanted to like also reach out for those other people. You know, you talked about this in terms of like coming out of the closet, the psychedelic closet. It's like there's so many people who feel afraid to like talk openly about this still, especially in more like state, like in the US, in states where it's super illegal or you're just in some random suburb somewhere. You know, it's how I felt. You know, I feel like I wasn't going to just go around talking about this stuff, but I was like so excited about it, and it felt like the easiest thing in the world for me to talk about because I love it so much and I'm so interested in it. So yeah, that's pretty much it.
Yeah, no, I love that, dude. I love your story. No, and I agree. It's hard to find people who, you know, because it's like I'm the same way. I have like a small sort of faction locally here who I can commune with in a way. But over the past like year or two, I feel like I've built this like really like powerful sort of network of individuals who also share this common interest, and like it's something that I feel an extreme amount of like gratitude for. You know, it's really cool. Like I remember when I first got the idea for like wanting to do a podcast and or a YouTube channel, it was actually like while I was still selling drugs and living in this apartment, and my roommate had showed me Trip Whip's channel and Rob's channel. And I just thought it was the coolest thing ever. I was like, these guys are doing exactly what I want to do. Like, just talk about this shit. Like, I found myself like, not only was I like selling this stuff, but I would do like, I just found like myself endlessly fascinated in researching and experimenting and educating others, you know, and it's funny because now it's like, all right, like I was looking up to these guys, and now, you know, both Rob and Trip Whip have been on the podcast, and it's really, it's fun, man. It's fun. And
Yeah.
it's like, I think what, like I've said earlier, I think one of the biggest problems with drugs is the misunderstanding of them and the misconceptions. And it's like, how do you address that? You address that with like real proper education. And one thing that I've been trying to like make more of a note to do over the past like few months, I've really like consciously turned myself, like been aware of this, is that like in the psychedelic community, I feel like there's a certain amount of like cookie cutter shit starting to go on, which is fine. Like there is things that need to be like constantly rehammered and, you know, talked about and educate people on. But I was like, I really want to make an effort to like be extra honest, like extra, like really honest and like transparent, because what you said about like the amount of people who are in the closet who find it hard to come out, I see that as like an act of service that I can provide others. Is like, not only like, am I going to come out of like the psychedelic closet and the fact that like, hey, I do these things and I think that they have potential benefit, you know, but like on it, but also like as much as I can and am willing to do, like give people the inside scoop to what's going on in my psyche. Cause you know, if you like, you got to wonder, like, as I'm sure people like as an outsider looking in, it's like, all right, this dude, like, he's still relatively young. He started relatively young, and he's done a pretty like large amount of these super powerful psychoactive compounds, like and also you add in like the fact that everyone's life is so unique and there's so much that leads up into like shaping you, who you are as a person. I get very interested in how these sort of ripple effects and the downstream effects that psychoactive drugs and especially psychedelic drugs can have on people's lives and how it can shape them and change them and stuff. And So I'm sure like people
Yeah.
looking at me, they're like, how is this going to turn out? You know what I mean? So there's like,
Yeah.
that's part of my journey is I'm just going to try and be completely honest about all the ups and the downs of it, dude.
Yeah. Yeah. That's great. Cause I think that's one of the benefits of doing this is like rewind a few years. This is another kind of impetus for me starting the channel is that like when I was 18, it was in 2011. So this was like well before psychedelics started like coming back out of the woodworks, and it was still very much taboo, very much like misunderstood. And like I didn't have anybody to like come to for advice or like perspectives on this. So it's like the whole Kundalini thing when that happened, dude, I thought I was going crazy. Like I thought I was losing my mind until I saw an Alex Gray painting that depicted the chakras, and I was like, "Oh, that's what happened to me." And then you read about it, and then some people like make up silly stuff about the chakras, and so you got to be like very like find it for yourself, I guess. But that's a whole other topic there. Um, but yeah, I just feel like people want to learn from others who have just been around the block slightly more. It's almost more relatable to learn from someone who's been doing something 3 to 10 years more than you than like someone who's like been doing it forever. They're like a master, and it's like they can't almost even relate to where you're at. So I think that's one of the the beautiful things about making stuff on YouTube is that we can be what we didn't have when we were like getting started.
Yeah. Yeah. That was like a shift that I had to realize in like my own content creation was that like just in general, like where I stand at it now is like, I just want to create things that like I'm proud of. And like, if I was myself as like an outsider looking in, I would look at that and think like, that's a cool like piece of art, you know? Cause like with all of this, like, it's kind of like what we were talking about in the chat. Like we are creating this sort of like library and this like little node to send out there, you know, and even if it's like the stuff that I create has a positive effect on one person, even just that, dude, like that would be like fantastic, you know? And like, I think it has, like, I've had people reach out to me and it's like, dude, like, yes.
Totally. And you meet cool people. Like part of this whole journey that I've been doing YouTube for like 2 years now. And like, I've met people that are like, you know, community in my Discord and like found me through the channel. But I've also met like other content creators like yourself. And it's kind of fun. Like we talked about being like a different beast. Like it's almost an even more specific version of the thing that I was seeking, that I'm able to connect with other like people who are so like-minded that they like feel compelled to make videos on the internet about psychedelics. So it's been really cool. And like the Discord thing that we're in, like the panel and stuff, like that actually started from me like hearing that Mr. Beast, you know, like for all of his like damage that he's done to like attention spans or whatever, he talked about how he's in like a group, like a support group of other YouTubers, and how it was like really helpful for him to like talk to them and like say, oh, hey, I made this mistake, and so here's what I did. And then it's like it saves all 5 of those people hours or weeks or whatever of mistakes that they could have made. And it's like you can lift each other up and learn from each other, especially if you're in the same niche. So I like suggested to Josie, I was like, hey, we should start a Discord like for psychedelic YouTubers. And then she was the one who actually like started it, but it was like kind of like she was like, yeah, that's a good idea. So it feels cool to like meet all of you guys. And like I found Jake's content, so I invited him to the Discord. And I was curious like how you came about like getting into that group.
It was Jake. Yeah. Yeah. Jake,
Okay.
me and Jake, apparently part of the reason why Jake started his channel was because like he found my content and he said like he said for him that was all that he needed. He was like, he found some other like normal guy who was like, I'm just going to start making some videos. And so he started making videos. And then uh, I think Jake commented on one of my videos and said something. He commented like and chimed in on it. And I was like, oh, come on my podcast. And he's like, yeah. And so he ended up coming on my podcast like last year when I first started making a few podcast episodes and playing around with it. And ever since then, me and Jake have just been like buddies, you know, like we have each other on Snapchat. We're like Snapchatting each other. Mm-hmm. I love Jake. Like, I like dude, legitimately love that dude. And like, me and him are definitely going to like meet up in person sometime, trying to do some like in-person content, which I would love to do with you too, man. I would love to do that. Yeah,
me and Jake have talked about that too. We one of our plans is to like track down Tim Leary's son, like learn shit from him.
Dude, there's this one guy. There's this one guy. What's his name? I need to look it up. Picard or something like that. He was like an LSD chemist who got released from prison a couple years ago. I really wanted to track him down and get him on the podcast. Nice. But what were you saying?
Yeah,
dude?
Well, I just want to add in real quick. You've been finding a lot of these like kind of like historic people from the past, you know, like you found the 30 hits of LSD guy, you found the psilomethoxin guy, and so that's a good angle.
The psilomethoxin was interesting to me, man. I was like, why aren't more people talking about this? I was like, if this is real, I was like, first of all, if it's not real and they've been lying to people, that's something to cover. You know what I'm saying? But I was like, but honestly, man, like, honest to God, like intuition from looking at everything, looking at both sides of the argument, and then talking to them and just looking at them, I don't think they're up to like nefarious things. I just don't get that feeling from them. I legitimately think they're acting in like the best of intentions. In terms of like the lab results, there's a lot of nuances to that as to why like their sample didn't show for psilomethoxin, and part of that's because like a reference sample is needed, and also like there is, even with there being psilomethoxin in there can still be some psilocybin, psilocin present that could be detectable, and also it's like it was an anonymous report. And so like the validity of it is questionable, on top of like they didn't prove that it was a psilomethoxin sample. Like there's no way to prove that they actually tested psilomethoxin. It could have just been regular psilocybin mushrooms. Like, but yeah, dude, the thing with that church, I was like, I just couldn't believe more people weren't like talking about it. And so I was like, all right, like and I made a TikTok video, and that TikTok video got like 500,000 views. And I was like, what the fuck? And the church reached out to me and was like, all right, like you got to try the sacrament now. So I tried it.
Like, oh, really?
Yeah, dude, it was interesting. And I told the guy while I was on the podcast with him, my experience with psilomethoxin. Okay. And for people who don't know, I'm sure they do if they're listening to my channel, because I've been talking about it a lot. But, so there's this church in Austin, Texas that originally started off as the Church of Psilomethoxin. Their name now is the Church of the Sacred Synthesis, but they were the Church of Psilomethoxin because they have this special compound, this special sacrament that's essentially a mixture between 5-MeO-DMT and psilocybin mushrooms. It's a matter of feeding the 5-MeO-DMT to the psilocybe substrate, and apparently they 4-hydroxylate it into this special compound. And apparently you can do this. It blew my mind, dude, on the podcast. Apparently you can do this with other tryptamines too, like not just. But they're talking about doing it with. What did you say?
This is just a dumb joke, but what if you fed psilocybin mushrooms to the bufo frog instead? Do you think that would work?
Like all of a sudden they start like alkalizing beta carotene, like MAOIs stuff too. Yeah. Like this, that'd be crazy, dude. That would be wild.
They grow crystal antlers, and then you like break that off and smoke it.
Oh, dude, that would be a tapestry right there. Is what that would be.
Yeah.
But yeah, dude. So this psilomethoxin is supposed to be similar but different to psilocybin mushrooms, just in terms of like qualitative, like subjective effects. And I tried it. It was different, I think, but not like this like radical, like, oh, whoa, you know, it felt very similar to psilocybin headspace. But one thing I noticed, there's a couple things I noticed, like the visual field felt different. there was like this sort of just like HD sort of like crystalline feel to it, which can happen on psilocybin mushrooms, but there wasn't as much as like the breathing and like colorfulness of it. Also, my eyes didn't get dilated the entire experience, which is something that reliably happens to me like every time I take psilocybin and or LSD. So that was interesting. It just felt slightly different, man. It felt slightly different, you know, and I don't know if I'm completely open to that being placebo, you know what I'm saying? But I had a lot of people reach out to me too on the internet, especially whenever I made that TikTok video, who were like members of the church and who sort of like anecdotally came forward to say like, hey, like, you know, it feels different. Like silomethoxin is different. And so I was like, I got to try it, man. I got to try it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'd be interested to try it, but yeah, I'm only a stone's throw away from Austin, so maybe I can go in person.
That's the crazy thing about it, dude, is you could be in fucking you could be in Oregon and they'll just ship it to you. You know, as long as you pay.
Wow.
You can become a church member for $11.99 a month, and then as a member of the church, then you get access to. They have like a catalog. They have like silomethoxin chocolate bars. They got silomethoxin capsules. Their goal is to like fully commercialize it. And he was like basically just like over the counter type shit, like in stores. And I was like, whoa, dude. I was like, which honestly, like, I think some people might get kind of squirrely about that because they're like irresponsible. And I do see, like, I think there's obviously going to have to be like some sort of like barrier to entry there. Like, you know, like at least like 21 and up or something like alcohol, you know, like show us your ID, like you're an adult. Like, I think there's got to be something like that. But I do believe in that, like, sort of ease of access of these things. And like, hey, I can scan a barcode and like, you know, get reliable COAs over here. And, also with that, it's like, they're not just trying to like, at least I didn't get the feeling that it was a money grab, you know, because there's a lot of on the back end too. You know, you're not just buying silomethoxin, you're also a member of the church, and there's like all sorts of weekly events, and you know, they have like microdosing events with each other, and there's a whole like sort of support system and network built around it for people to use silomethoxin as a tool. So yeah, I'm sorry to ramble on about silomethoxin, but it's fascinating.
No, I mean, I'm interested in it. Do you think that they're able to like mail it because it's some unique compound that it's not technically illegal, or are they just doing it under the radar?
Yeah, well, I do think it's because it's if it is 5-MeO 4-HO-DMT, then it is not a controlled substance, you know, so they can get away with that. But also, one thing that like I think people need to be aware of is that there's a lot of psychedelic churches right now operating in this country that are operating in like this sort of like gray area, you know, of the law.
Because it's a church, yeah.
Right. But, you know, if push came to shove, they could be prosecuted for sure. But there's like so many of these, there's just that, it's the fact that there's so many in operation now, and most of them like don't have this sort of like, at least from what I've been reading, they establish sort of like relationships with their communities and local law enforcement and have like safety parameters and like true like medical screening involved and all sorts of shit like that. So it's like, hey, like these people are coming in and like helping veterans in our community and they're not hurting people. Like we're going to kind of leave them alone and look the other way. There is a lot of that going on around the country. Like most of it is like in that sort of sphere of things. And then also, of course, you have like these select few places like Portland and then like Colorado where you can kind of just like openly do mushrooms. I'm not like speaking like in public, but like, you know, you can kind of like barter and trade and then distribute and consume and grow without really any sort of worries there.
Right.
So
right. Decriminalize. Yeah. And they have, like ketamine clinics here in Houston. I've never gone to one, but like it's just interesting. It's another one of those like semi-legal, like don't know what to call it situations. But it's going to be interesting how the rest of this decade plays out, man.
Yeah, one thing that I'm gonna enjoy watching is the like capitalistic market that builds up around psychedelics, and like because like it's beautiful and it's fun, but there's also some fiduciary involved, and there's some cringiness. And like one thing I've
Mm.
noticed is like there's a huge market right now for psychedelic integration coaching, which is not a bad thing. You know what I'm
Mhm.
saying? I don't think that's. I think there's plenty of people out there who probably can act as that and provide that as like true value to others, and I think that's awesome. But dude,
Mhm.
I'm telling you, like I'm just calling it right now, Tyler. There's going to be so many motherfuckers who call themselves psychedelic integration coaches who
Right.
probably have no fucking business being your
Right.
integration coach. And not only that, like there's a huge market for that, but there's a lot of people trying to become psychedelic integration coaches, and I know that because if you type in like psychedelic integration coaching program or psychedelic therapy, like psychedelic facilitator coaching program, dude, there is like 30 companies will pop up right away
Yeah.
selling you several month-long courses that are several thousands of dollars. Like it's a huge industry
Yeah.
just coaching people now too for that, which
Right. Right. I know of have you ever heard of TAM integration?
Tam, no,
Um
no.
yeah, he's an integration coach, but he's the real deal. I've been following him on like TikTok and Instagram and stuff. And he's really the real deal. I'm actually going to be talking to him on a podcast. So, but I know that he does integration coaching. That's the galaxy brain move right there. You be a coach to coach or coach people to coach.
I'm gonna have to hit this guy up. I'm gonna have to find him. Say, hey man,
Yeah.
coach. Like, dude, honestly, like it's like legitimately. I was just kind of like trashing on it, but I think I would like to be a psychedelic integration coach. Sit here
Yeah.
and like truly like help people. Like, because uh, like I think people can get demystified sometimes by that because it's like they have this notion that anybody who's trying to be a psychedelic or like anybody who's trying to be an integration coach like that is like one of these fake gurus. And while
Right.
I do think a lot of people are going to be the fake gurus, but I think that there's a lot of people who will also possess certain skills and experience
Yeah.
that can like make them put them in a place where they can serve as that rocket fuel for other people. I really believe that, dude.
Exactly.
You
Yeah,
know?
exactly. So I agree that like there's going to be a lot of grifters and like I think one of the things that Eric Davis, who I consider a mentor, even though he doesn't directly like teach me, I'm like a big follower of his. He was talking about like the inherent risk of things, but especially in like the psychedelic context. It's like there's always going to be a risk involved when you're taking psychedelics by yourself. There's a risk there, but that's actually, and then there's also the legal risk. But for some people, that's actually like part of the experience is that risk and like that thrill of going for it. And I feel like you could apply that same line of thinking to like the industry at large, where it's like there is a risk that you will come across a grifter or like a fake guru or a fake integration coach or just someone who's radically incompetent. But it's like we just need to like arm ourselves to discern that risk and like and make the good calls. And yeah, I agree with you, man. Like there's going to be a bunch of grifters, but then there's also people who are like the real deal and like genuinely coming from a place of like service and helping people. And I would like to do that too, man. But I looked at the course and bro, that's like, yeah, it's in the thousands of dollars. So yeah, so I was like, maybe not now. Maybe if the YouTube channel pops off, that could be a cool like next step or whatever like in life. So I see myself doing that sometime down the line. And for now, we can just build our own experiences. And I actually trip sat a friend of mine, and like now I want to call him and like get his like 2 week later report and see how he's integrating things. And like I made sure it was like ceremonial when we had the experience. So like I have an interest as well in like holding that space for people. And it sounds like you've been doing that since day one, essentially, Launchpad and everything.
Yeah, dude. And like I've talked about it before, but you know, it's like I fully recognize I don't like encourage other people to like take that path, but that's like just like honestly the path that I walked. I got super obsessed with this shit and was like involved on with it on multiple levels, and I felt like this immense desire to share it, dude, like in every way, like through my speech, through the way I carried myself, through selling it to people, through directly facilitating the experience for people who wanted to have it. You know, it was just like, of any way that I can be of service, it was like, I'm here, you know, and I still feel that way, man. I still feel that way. Like there are certain boundaries I have now. I do, you know, but it's like, I'm still like I'll have just like random people reach out to me on Instagram or something, man. It's like, I'm dealing with like this problem of like the one thing that people really struggle with DMT, dude, is like vaporizing it correctly. You know what I mean? Like finding a proper technique to kind of like efficiently do it. It's funny that it's just got brought up, but I actually just finished writing an ebook, and like I'm going to turn it into like I'm going to turn it into like a physical book too that I'll sell on like my website. But I made the ebook. I'm going to like list it up for free and stuff, but the title of it is How to Smoke DMT, and it's a comprehensive guide, like about like 90 pages long, that involves like procure. Wow. Yeah, dude. I was like, I just threw everything in there that I knew about, like, first of all, like procuring it, you know, preparing yourself for it, vaporization methods and techniques. I threw in a little bit in there about like integration, you know what I mean? Just like, because I've had so many people reach out to me with those basic questions that I realized I was like, if I just create like this little like encyclopedia like thing, I could just point people to that. Like, hey, free ebook, go download it, you know?
Yeah, that's perfect. That's awesome, man. Yeah, I'll cop one.
Yeah, dude. Yeah, I'll let you know when it's out. I'll post on like socials and stuff. I'm waiting to get like my physical copy in the mail so I can see if I like it before I like post it on Instagram and stuff like that.
Right.
Yeah. But
nice.
Yeah, dude. So okay. We've gone down a lot of rabbit holes today and stuff, man. This has been fun.
Oh yeah.
So
love me some rabbit holes.
How much more time do you have left, brother? Because I don't want to like wear you out. Or...
I can go till 9.
Okay, so we have a 30 more minutes.
Yeah.
All right, man. Bet. Okay, so you know that podcast that they had the other day that we were not a part of, the other panel discussion? The psych-tubers were discussing materialism versus idealism in the context of psychedelics. I just kind of wanted to get, first of all, I just want to like hats off to all of them, because I watched that video from start to end and like really enjoyed it, dude. Like it was a great conversation they had. And I felt like everyone kind of chimed in valuably in their own way. But yeah, what is sort of your view and your like, where do you stand on that? The whole idea of materialism and idealism of psychedelics.
Yeah. Well, I watched it too, and I really enjoyed it. And just hearing all the different personalities and stuff, I love all of those people, man. They're such characters. And like Vivek being like, it's mystical that.
I love Vivek. There's something about Vivek where it's like, I just want to go to a music festival with you and just watch you like.
Yeah. So I would probably have been in the fence sitter category, but I would say that I lean more towards the idealist camp, but the materialist reductionist side of me is like a necessary component. It's all part of it to me. And I think there's no way to be like totally 50-50 about it. I think that you lean and sway just depending on the context. So I would say I'm like 55% idealism, 45% materialist. Because like when I got into psychedelics, at the very same time I got into Terrence McKenna, I got into Carl Sagan, and I was like obsessed with the Cosmos series. And in the Cosmos series, he does a great job of instilling like what science has to offer and how like the scientific method is kind of the best game in town in many ways that we have to understand our universe in a way that's not purely magical. You know, it's like with the scientific method, we can test, repeat, and verify, and a third party can verify something that is true. However, that's mostly in the like Newtonian classical physics universe. I feel like once you start getting into the quantum level, maybe some of that stuff starts to get a little murky. But so I've always had like a citizen science mindset where, you know, like I kind of stopped to even question a lot of my own beliefs, like the Kundalini thing. Um, I was convinced that it was real because, like what we were saying earlier, like that it happened to me and it happens to other people, and I had no like previous knowledge of that. And the universe just like struck me like a lightning bolt. So the fact that something like that would happen puts me in a very like idealist, like there's some magic going on here. Uh it's a huge part of my worldview, but like at the same time, I know that like you have to be able to back stuff up. Like you got to be able to prove your point. And so there was times where I like stopped even believing in the Kundalini stuff because what you hear people talk about it like with their whole chest. They're like, yeah, this chakra is responsible for this, this, and this. And it's like, they're just making it up or like read it somewhere. And it's like, they're literally talking out of their ass, and they make and chakras have become like the thing you make fun of, right? It's like, oh bro, you need to just get your chakras aligned. But it's like I get that because what is being said, it sounds so silly. But I kind of have this mindset of like similar to UFOs where it's like the phenomenon is real. We can't deny that like something here is happening. We just don't know. And like people always want to like have an answer for things. They want to like have closure and know what it is. But the world is not like gonna give up its secrets so easily. And so with that said, that's like the materialist side. So the reason I lean more into the idealist camp is because to me, mystery is at the heart of the universe and existence. And I believe something akin to magic. Maybe we can explain it, you know, like, you know, Josie on the podcast or the panel, she said she was like a panpsychist, which is like not something that is proven by science currently. She describes it as if it is already like, well, it could just be another fundamental part of the universe, consciousness, gravity, which I think that would be great, but we're not at that point to be able to say that yet. It is still kind of a leap and a mystery right now. Which is why I love the fact that like the ancient rituals were called the mysteries, because to me that is like my spirituality is appreciating the mystery, appreciating that there is a grand mystery at the heart of it. And things have happened to me that like seem magical, and I feel like I'm getting these things from the collective unconscious, and it's like even if we can prove it, like who's to say that there isn't something even beyond like our own experience that's like another type of magic that's happening at the heart of the universe that we just don't even know yet. So yeah, that's kind of where I stand. I'm on the fence, but like I lean a little bit more towards the idealist camp.
Yeah, no, dude, fuck yeah, I'm with you. Like I'm in a very similar place in terms of like I'm very much on the fence, but I like when the more I talk about it with others and think about it, I definitely probably lean towards the idealism. But I think what you said was super important about like the materialism part of me is like necessary for that, because I think that man, honestly, like, if you really love and respect and admire something, one of like the highest forms of love that you can show something is like skepticism, you know, like that healthy sort of like tough love, you know, and that it's like, where do we draw the line between science and magic? Because even like the things that they can explain right now, which they can explain a lot, but a lot of science itself and the explanations they have like if you think about it, really think about it, those things are already magic. It's like you've just found a way to like explain it using like our words and like our sort of like reference points, and like have, you know, been able to like glue those together. But like you're explaining a magical thing, and I think I've brought this up twice now to the solid methoxin guy and to the trip whip, because both these conversations came up, funny enough. But yeah, no, with Terrence McKenna had this quote, and I'm going to butcher it, but he was talking about science. And he was like, you know, science, like they say that they can explain everything away, and they can, you know, like they can explain everything away, but they ask you for one miracle, you know, the Big Bang. And I was like, oh, like I think I was like tripping when I heard him say that.
Oh, yeah.
Which that's a funny phenomenon, like that me and you can rabbit hole sometime, is like the phenomenon about people tripping and like, especially at the beginning of their tripping days, getting obsessed with like Terrence McKenna and Alan Watts and some of these other figures.
Yeah.
Like, there's something that's a repeated pattern. But yeah, dude, when I heard Terrence say that, I was like, oh shit, you know, like he, you know, he's right. Like, at what point does it become, is it a material thing and then a magical thing? Because to me, like sometimes, like, especially when I'm tripping, man, material things can still be material things, but they're magical now because I'm thinking about it. It's like that. I forget what the story was exactly, but it was the Buddha was talking about a flower, right? And like when he was talking about this flower, he was like, if you really look at the flower, he's like, it's not just like made of a flower. You know what I'm saying? He's like, if you really are like mindful and you're looking at the flower is made of like the sun in the air. You know what I'm saying? Like it needed the sun. It's also a product of like dead things. You know what I mean? And like air, you know, and like he was really like breaking down just a flower, which I'm sorry that I'm rambling here, but yeah, mindfulness.
No, that's definitely true. Yeah, you got to include like we're not separate. We are an organism environment pair, you know, like we are not separate. And that's why it's fun to like call us earthlings, because we are just like little, like we're like the pimples of the earth.
Dude, I haven't thought of it like that. Earthlings. I kind of like that though. I kind of like that. You know, cuz there has been, like, I always feel connected to nature when I'm in nature because it's beautiful and there's something that it does to like my nervous system, I'm pretty sure, and stuff. But I've had like a few experiences, man, of like being in nature on mushrooms, where it really does feel like that sort of merge happens. This like kind of spiritual, like I feel you, girl. Like you're a good girl. You're a healthy girl. It's like feminine, like spirit connection to that, you know, Mother Earth. And have you ever seen the Avatar movies with the blue people?
Yeah, for sure.
Oh, dude, those movies get me. Like their whole like it gives me a very like heavy ayahuasca vibes.
Yeah,
you know, because they're like
the way they plug in to the Mother Nature.
Right, and they're like AWA. They refer to it as AWA, and they have like all these like mystical experiences that seem to just be a normal, integrated part of their day.
Yeah,
you know?
It's like Gaia. Gaia is like the term that we throw around. I think that there's something to that, and for whatever reason, it's interesting to note that particular psychedelics seem to be more rooted in that, like the tryptamines seem to be like mushrooms and ayahuasca, for whatever reason, seem to be more like plugging into that Gaia, like that planetary consciousness. Where for me, LSD is like, it's like a personal amplifier. It's like it takes your own psyche and just like turns everything up to 1,000, but it also goes to like the cosmic levels for me. Mushrooms can too, but it's a little weirder in a way, and it always feels earth. At least that earth is a link in the chain of you like ascending to this cosmic level.
Yeah. No, I think you described that really well. For me, like mushrooms has always felt like that. It has that very mystical, magical, like what you were describing, like tryptamine feel, like that tryptamine palace, you know. it does
Mm-hmm.
feel like you're like you can get into like the waiting room almost with it. Whereas like acid can get very cosmic too and like the otherworldly, but in its
Mm-hmm.
own way to me, and that's just like subjective to me, you know. Acid is much more cerebral. It seems like
Yeah.
when I take mushrooms, it can often get very like emotional and like this like hero's journey
Yeah.
thing, and then also like can get like divine at moments, you know. But then acids, like you said, this uptick where it feels like if my brain's an engine, that engine's like running hot, like really hot for like 12 hours.
Mm-hmm.
Not in a bad way. It
Yeah.
sounds like speedy, but acid, that's the thing though. Acid does feel a tiny bit speedy to me, man. Like I
It
might,
is. Yeah.
yeah, I think like my like jaw will tighten up and I'm like,
Yep.
like, yeah.
Yeah. Do you ever get this feeling when you're on acid? It feels like little like bolts of electricity going through your legs. You ever experience that?
Uh, Not really, man, honestly. No,
Okay.
I experienced like,
That's just me.
I don't know. Have you like found anybody else who does?
I mean, I know some people get like restless legs, so it's kind of like connected to that, but it's a very distinct thing that happens to me where I just feel like little, it feels more like little like electric impulses that are going like down my leg. It doesn't hurt or anything. It just feels like a little jolt, like a little ding, ding, like just a little,
Interesting.
almost like a muscle twitch. Maybe that's what it is, like a muscle twitch, but it feels like electric. So to me, I'm just kind of connecting that to the whole like speedy thing.
Yeah, there is a couple of like different reliable physiological effects that I get from something like LSD, and the sort of like jaw tightness is a pretty reliable
Hmm.
one. Also, like I get it's always a slight amount, never a really like bad or super unenjoyable amount, but I always get a slight amount of like gastrointestinal, like once I've like
Mm.
because I always take it and like let the tab sit sublingually for 15. Sometimes I'll forget about it and leave it in for like 30 minutes, but then I'll end up
Yeah,
swallowing it. And that's just like my ritual kind of with acid for whatever reason. But I always
yeah,
get a slight amount of that gastrointestinal, like just kind of like queasiness. It's like different muscles are in
yeah.
control of my stomach now, you know?
Mm.
Um,
I think there might be a reason for that because I'm pretty sure there's like a ton of serotonin receptors in your gut, so maybe that has something to do with that.
yeah. Yeah. Do you get a lot of nausea on like mushrooms and stuff?
Um, I get it sometimes. I almost always trip on an empty stomach, which I think does a lot to reduce the nausea. But yeah, last time I took mushrooms, I definitely like felt a little queasy at first. And it was funny because like we were starting to trip, me and my roommate, and like sometimes I'll get this like buildup of gas in my chest and I'll have to like burp it up. And I think because we had lemon tech, it was like really gassy in there. And so I was like trying to get this burp out. Like it's like I need to like dislodge this like giant burp. So I'm just like going like bleh, bleh. And then my roommate is like starting to trip and he's hearing all these like guttural noises that I'm making. But then I finally like let out this like huge burp and it just felt like blissful, dude. Like it felt like bleh. And I was like, oh.
Yeah,
Um,
your friends over there,
yeah,
like, I felt that for you.
yeah, yeah.
Dude, that's awesome. Okay, so do you also experience this, man? It's like every single time I do, one of these psychedelics, like mushrooms or LSD, even like 2CB, I'll experience this come up phase. That's like that, like once the effects start to kick in. So usually 30, 45 minutes for the next about like an hour or so, dude. Sometimes the next like 2 hours, if it's LSD, I'll just like feel this immense amount of body load and this
Mm,
like this sometimes this anxiety and this like and I always just kind of like come back to my breath, and I know it's like the come up, but there's like this stepping into something. You know what I'm saying? I don't know if you want to call it like, you're losing the ego or whatever the fuck, but like, that's something I experience almost every time I do psychedelics, dude. And it's not that it's ever like a bad thing. I know what it is, but it's like this phase of like riding the rocket ship up a little bit.
Yeah.
Do you experience that too?
For sure, dude. Yeah. Every single time.
What do you
specifically
do?
with mushrooms? Well, I just do what you said. I just kind of bring myself back to my breath, and I remind myself, like, because sometimes that can also get scary. Like the last time I tripped, it felt like almost like a sense of doom, and I was like, "Oh, this is getting kind of heavy," and so I just like kept breathing, and I was like, "Okay, you're safe, you're in your home, you're all right," and it's just that physical sensation too. It felt like, the way I described it is, it felt like a cement pillar went like like in my like spirit body or whatever, and it felt like this sense of like tension. And then it's just like I even get that with weed, dude. Like sometimes like just the come up of like, if you smoke a lot, like immediately that like ramp up can be jarring, and I think it has something to do with like being able to let go of your normal consciousness. It's like it's wanting to hold on, and it doesn't like that. um maybe there's a way we can teach ourselves to transition a little better than like what we're already doing. What were you gonna say?
Yeah. No, and like I think you described it perfectly, and I think that maybe I've kind of thought like maybe it's part of like built into the experience, like part of it, because I didn't like give the full story, I guess, when I was talking about it. Like while I almost always experience that, I almost always also experience the like aha, and like the laughter, and then like the whole thing will switch. It almost seems like it can happen in an instance, like just like an instantly sometimes. And it's funny because it'll be like this kind of like anxiety and confusion, and then all of a sudden it's this like hyper sobriety, clarity, laughing at myself. Like, it's a, what I've used this term many times already in this podcast, but it's this fun kind of like hero's journey that plays out,
Absolutely, dude. Absolutely. One of the other things that I did in my last trip was I took a Terrence McKenna advice, and I sang, and I was just like listening to this ambient track. There's like super calming music, but it was like not helping, or it wasn't making it worse, but it was like I was still gonna go through it. And I was just like improvising, and I was just like, and I started recording it actually. And then because I left my voice memo on, I ended up recording like the entire trip. And so my most recent YouTube video is like a full in-depth trip report about this experience. But it followed the craziest hero's journey, bro. Like that was one of my big takeaways from this experience. I was like, okay, either if you want to look at this in the materialist perspective or the idealist perspective, like either way is amazing, because it's like idealism, maybe this is like some magical like download that I'm getting, like that the mushroom is an entity and that it's orchestrating a certain thing for me to see, and it like knows what I need, which is what it feels like when I'm experiencing it. It feels like and earlier you talked about how you write down your intentions and you like go into it like that. I'm 100%, I do the same exact thing that you do. So part of this trip was to like explore certain aspects, and then sure enough it came up. And so one of the first things that happens when I was going through this like difficult phase is I saw like a cosmic caterpillar. It was like this giant like space caterpillar. And so then I kept going through the trip. And then once that switch finally flipped, like what you were saying, like once the peak was going and I was like feeling good, I was closing my eyes and I saw like butterfly patterns, like fractal butterfly patterns that were just beautiful. And it was like going with the music, and I was like dancing, and it was like I was like shedding all of this like inhibition and like stress that I had built over months. And it was like over the span of 2 hours. So it's like, how, like, either this is some like entity showing me a whole narrative of like a butterfly, a caterpillar going through a butterfly, and it's like a metaphor for my life, or the brain is generating that, which even if it is just coming from the brain, like that is amazing that the brain can create a hero's journey. And what's amazing to me about that is like when it showed me the caterpillar, how is it going to know that it was going to go, that it was going to go well, and I was going to see that like butterfly vision and like have a good trip. It's almost as if it was setting it up and it knew like hours in advance of like what this experience was going to pan out to be. And that's what blows my mind.
Dude, yeah, no, I'm the same way. I constantly, with these experiences that I have, go back and forth between like, okay, like that was some extra, like next level mystical shit that seems like too much to be a coincidence. But then I also like try and like keep myself grounded and skeptical and open to the idea that maybe it is a matter of just material things, like you're saying, like, but like you said though, even if it is just my subconscious, that is still fucking crazy. Because like some of the experiences that I've had, man, have just seemed like too like next level, and once I say like coincidental for it to be like just a matter of. And that thing you said about it feeling like they're getting ready for me hours in advance, it reminded me of this particular trip that I had. I mean, I've had many trips where there's that feeling of like, oh, they were like waiting for me, like, hey bitch, like we're ready for you. But I remember this one time, man, I was on pharmawaska, which is like essentially like the encapsulated form of ayahuasca. So, I took some MAOIs orally encapsulated. And then about like 45 minutes later, I took some encapsulated DMT, like pharmawaska.
Right.
So while I was on the pharmawaska, I also smoked DMT, which is like, smoking DMT while on an MAOI just like really extends and deepens the experience. But it was funny. I smoked DMT 3 times that night, but in one of those experiences, I had all of these entities like appear in my visual field. And as soon as they appeared, I had that feeling. And it felt like if you've ever watched like NASCAR, when like a guy pulls off to get his tires changed and everyone like runs up like, we got to fix them. Like, and they're all like changing them as fast as they can. It felt like that's what the entities were doing with me. Like they knew like,
oh yeah,
surgery. And they were like going into me, dude. And like, it felt like they were like fixing things like somatically within my body and like tweaking. And like, it wasn't like anything like, ouch, or it just viscerally felt like I was being like toyed with, dude. It was really, really odd. So yeah, I'm constantly going back and forth, man. But honestly, I asked Rob and Tripwhip this same question. I want to ask you this question. I've noticed this cycle in me, where I'll have these experiences that are super mystical, and it'll have me like leaning very heavily towards the like idealistic side of things and idealism and stuff. But then I'll be like somewhat removed from those experiences and like have the sort of like conditioning and or bullshit that like sometimes that normal life can throw at you and stuff like that. And I'll find myself becoming like more grounded and sometimes a little more materialistic and skeptical. And then I'll have another experience, and it's like that pendulum shifts, and it's never that I'm fully one way. I'm never fully one way. It's just like I've noticed that sort of swinging of things in my own subjective sort of journey so far. And I was wondering if you've noticed something like that.
Yeah, that's definitely it. And I feel like this is one of the things that I've learned from Eric Davis, where it's like, as opposed to thinking of it as like a pure 50-50 split between these two mindsets, it's almost as if there's different modes of being. And one of them calls for this radical open-mindedness. And then one of them calls for this grounded skepticism. And so I think entertaining ideas and like letting yourself go down the rabbit hole is incredible. And like I think that the mind is like a mythopoetic generator is what I like to call it. It's like we're storytelling to ourselves a story that is like rich, full of magic and meaning. And I feel like we shouldn't just slap that down. You know what I mean? Like even if it isn't always grounded completely in reality, like we need to like lean into that power that our brain has to like create these narratives and these amazing like things. So yeah, that's kind of how I treat it. I just treat it as if it's like different modes where it's like if I'm exploring those possibilities, I'm like radically open to it. But like if I'm trying to like act on something, then that's where I need to be like, okay, you might be wrong. Like don't go and try to like start a cult or something, which I don't think I'm gonna do. But you know what I mean? It's just like it all just depends on like the mode.
No, I mean, I think that's kind of like where the importance of like staying grounded with it comes, because you do see people,
Yeah.
dude, who you see it all the time. The people who lose themselves to the delusion of it. You know what I'm saying?
Totally.
You
Yeah,
know,
totally.
and that can be hard to watch because it's like, oh man, like you know. But yeah, dude. So it's 8:59. We're gonna wrap things up. Is there anything that you would like to leave the audience with, Tyler?
I think we pretty much covered everything. Yeah, I guess just to sum up everything, like stay open-minded. I think Rob had a really funny way of saying it in the panel. He was like, "I just leave." I can't do the accent. He's like, "Just leave the door open, and but not wide enough to let the bullshit get in." And I thought that was great.
Dude, yeah, Rob's funny. Dude, one time
Yeah.
Rob was on my podcast and he said something like, "Oh, bless his little cotton socks," and I damn near lost it. I was like,
Yeah.
"This dude, he cracks
I
me up."
know. It's so funny to hear all those British voices in your ear when we're on the panel. And it's like, oh, yeah, I'm off my tits. Like all those funny stuff that they say.
Yeah, see, you wouldn't think it because of the way he acts, but Rob's like
Mhm.
46, and whenever me and him
Mhm.
recorded a podcast together, like before we started recording, we were talking, you know, before you hit the record button.
Mhm.
And he was like talking about how like old he felt compared to all of us and stuff.
Oh,
And
yeah.
he was jokingly like, "I'm gonna be like the Gandalf and like grow up my beard and like have like a totem and stuff while all of y'all speak."
Yeah.
I was like, "Dude, like we gotta make him like a little festival totem that like lights up and shit, and he's
Yeah.
just like our little Gandalf while we speak."
Yeah.
But yeah,
He's
man.
our DMT Gandalf.
Yeah. So where can people find you at, Tyler? Where can people find you at?
Yeah. YouTube mainly. Find the others. Tyler Saucier. And I'm on Instagram as well and TikTok, but YouTube is really where I focus all my energy.
Awesome. Yeah, I'll make sure I put all of his links and stuff down in the description of whatever you guys are watching this
Thanks,
on or
man.
listening to this on. So, yeah, heck yeah. Tyler, we're going to have you on back here soon, buddy. This has been a lot of
Oh,
fun.
yeah,
Appreciate you coming on the Launchpad
absolutely.
podcast.